Today, get tales from the trenches on how Tanium is helping in the daily fight with Log4j, identification, remediation, then also learning from those patterns and practices that we're doing daily right now. How can we be ready for what's coming beyond Log4j? Welcome back to the Go-Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone. And Tanium as a company right now is responding full force to the Log4j crisis at hand. Welcome back after the holidays here. I hope you had a little chance to get away with family during this crisis, that you weren't firefighting the entire time, hopefully. But now we're ready to really take a second look at this and get some real focus on what's happening actually in the field. Now that we've got some stories coming back, we want to share those with you today. And then also take a look at what's going on beyond this. How can we be ready in the future and see this coming next time and be ready for it? So today I have a special set of guests, a father and son team. It's been said that Tanium was founded by a father and son team. We have a number of father and son teams actually here at the company. You've met Tim Morris on some of our other shows, but you've not met his son, Ashton. Ashton and I were actually on the same team when I hired in, and it's been a while since we've gotten to catch up, so I'm glad to have them both on the show today. Ashton, why don't you introduce yourself for us?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I am thrilled to be here on my first Go-Tanium show appearance. So my name is Ashton Morris. I'm based out of North Carolina. I'm a regional vice president within our TAM organization here. I'm coming up on 7 years at Tanium, joined back in April of 2015. I started at a fairly junior role here and just been loving it ever since, helping customers be successful with our tools. And that has had a whole new meaning over the last few weeks.
And I can tell you this, that Ashton has a lot of respect in the company. He has proven himself over and over the way he's really, like you said, he's an OG. He's been here 7 years. There's not a lot of people that can say that. So, and now he's leading people in that regard. And so he always brings a lot of good color to the conversation. And then Ashton's dad, Tim, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. It's Tim Morris. I just joined Tanium back in May of last year. So technically, Ashton could call me rookie. It's kind of weird, but I like it. Prior to Tanium, I was with Wells Fargo for 22 years. I led cyber threat engineering research, which was forensics and red teaming. And we were also the product owner on over 500,000 endpoints. So it has some real world experience on how Tanium as a platform can be used for vulnerabilities like this. So looking forward to get into it, Ashley.
Yeah, well, let's do that. Let's dive right in. So Ashton, as someone who's leading a team of TMs, technical account managers in the field, you had that role. I had that role. We've paid our dues in the trenches with customers every day. Now you have a unique perspective across multiple accounts, managing a team of TMs and getting, I know you get your hands in it too. So tell us, what have you and your team seen in the field with how Tanium is helping customers with Log4j, and specifically using that reveal module that we featured a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. And I have to say, just being a part of this organization, it has been really cool to see everyone just jumping in with customers. I know, especially in mid-December, the team we were bouncing from call to call, customer to customer, getting them spun up on Reveal. And the reason is, and I know we've done other sessions on why Reveal is needed within this particular context. But it's just been helping people get a good comprehensive view. That has been the number one thing I would say, Ashley, is just the comprehensive view of where Log4j is, both version 1 and version 2. That has been the largest effort. And when I say comprehensive, I mean a couple of things there. I mean comprehensive in terms of the disk and individual endpoints, because of the number of ways we've found this can manifest itself. And then also comprehensive environment-wise. right? So in some examples, we're seeing people go really deep on specific endpoints where they're finding instance after instance after instance where there's so many hits found by Reveal because it has been repackaged. But then we're also finding in those subsidiary affiliate, those acquired environments, those other cloud environments that have maybe a different tool set or a different set of controls. These are the things where I think we're showing a lot of value because we're going beyond what a lot of the other tool sets are providing our customers today. And so it's just been a lot of helping them identify the instances and building a workflow to remediate and prioritize them.
I know you brought some lab screenshots. Obviously, we would never share customer exact stuff on a show like this, but you've got some lab simulations of some things that we found in customer environments. Again, protecting customer identities and so forth. Could you share with us some of those things? And I know some of these are kind of surprising as well. You were sharing before we hit the record button here. You guys have really found some interesting situations.
Yes, we have. So the first thing I want to share, and there isn't anything too interesting with this one. Folks are probably very familiar with similar queries to this of just tell me everywhere where I've got log4j in a file name. The reason I'm showing this is this particular endpoint. This was taken by one of the members of my team within his lab. And it's a good example where this system has Microsoft's SQL Server Management Studio installed, which by default doesn't contain anything, with vulnerable instances of Log4j, but there is an option to install an option to get Hadoop, to manage Hadoop instances with SSMS. So there's nothing here, and that option is installed on this particular host. But then whenever you go and Reveal and you look at the exact same host name as TJB 01, you do find vulnerable instances of Log4j because it was brought in on that option. And I show this example because everyone who has been, fighting this fire over the last several weeks, they've identified edge case after edge case after edge case after edge case on scoping this thing and trying to figure out what is vulnerable. So I would say this is one thing that I would just really encourage folks to take a look at, not just the index data, but really get a good hard look at what is coming in Reveal. I know that there's a lot of hits. There is. When you get into a large production environment, just personally, my team, just within our region, we've rolled Reveal out to over 250,000 endpoints at this point. And whenever you have that large of a sample size, you will have tens of thousands of hits. And that's something that's been really shocking. If you don't mind, actually, one thing I would love to let the users know is how do we prioritize those, if you don't mind?
Sure.
So there's a couple here. One is, when you have so many hits and you need to try to prioritize, at first people were only doing web servers, which is important, right? But obviously this thing can be everywhere. And you need to know where it is in use. And there's a couple sensors our TAMs have shared with our users over the last several weeks. This one here is command line of process. So where the command line of the Java process, where the command line contains log4j, and you can see some Minecraft examples here. So obviously our admins know you can drill down or merge in host name or IP address to get a good heading on, okay, we are running log4j, so I need to prioritize these hosts.
So to summarize that, so really what we're doing here is we're saying there's a process in memory running right now, and in its command line execution path, we can see that log4j is there. So it doesn't matter how many, at rest copies there are. These are the ones that are actively in use to help us prioritize that. That's really, really helpful for scoping.
It is. And again, in a reminder, this is such a huge part of Tanium and why I love the software whenever it is rolled out properly. That is the number one thing that you can do. And I know that we're going to get to this later, but every environment, right? You're asking this of every domain that you have, of every, if deployed, every merger acquisition. So it is very important to understand the scope of these things. Another good example is the file handles of process. This is another great sensor included with the threat response content. The file handles of the java.w.exe process of a particular host. I am filtered by text on log4. You can see that. And so I could see this log4j core vulnerable version. And again, this is something live being run right now. Example. And the last one I'll show you here, this is actually an example of map. Map is really helpful for understanding all of the network connections, and it includes the command line of the process that is initiating or associated with these connections. And so here of course, you see the source, destination, IP, and port, but you also see the full command line and the process name and that process file, where that command line contains log4j. So it's just another way, but gives you additional detail on what is it talking to, right? And it gives you a little bit more of the picture. So identifying live use with the broader platform has helped customers prioritize which ones need to be immediately remediated. And I think it's been really helpful.
This is great to see in practicality. There's the plan that you have, and then once you get into the battle, that lasts about 5 minutes, right? So this is what's really happening in the field. One other question I had for you is, I know there are a lot of people in the industry responding to log4j, and we wouldn't expect anything less. There are a lot of custom scripts that have been released to help scope and hunt this. And I would have to imagine that at scale, trying to administer those scripts could run into, disk being consumed, trying to scan all the files and things like that. Could you talk a little bit about, are customers using those, or do they need that in addition to Tanium, or how does that set? What are we seeing in the field?
One of the things that we're having to help people get over, I think, a little bit is a false sense of security sometimes, because in some cases we're getting in and we're showing so much data, and sometimes it may be too much data in the beginning, and then we fine tune and we get a little bit better. But I would rather have that case than, okay, tool XYZ said that I was good, especially in this case, because of just the nature of there not being a set path. Your other tools that you would typically buy to find vulnerabilities, it's just not comprehensive at this point. You just don't know every instance. And then, which leads to custom content development that's being run. And some of the concerns that I've seen with those approaches are, one is resource consumption is the number one concern. When you're doing things like find commands, locate, imlocate, there's a huge risk to consuming 90 to 100% of the CPU. And whenever you have thinner boxes or virtual systems, you're really going to be testing, if not causing serious impact on those. And that's why the approach that Index has taken of low and slow collecting this inventory and then refreshing it is really important, because when you run these, you're going to get your report, but there's also a few assumptions when you do these one-time things. One, it is one time. And when you ran it one time, what was the scope? Again, was it everywhere? Was it in every nook and cranny? Because this affects workstations too. I know we're prioritizing, but that's a big one. And then secondly, this has to be a continuous effort. So how many times are you going to be running this? Twice isn't going to be good enough. It's going to be it's going to be on some cadence, right? Until there's a level of confidence. So the resource utilization, the assumption that you are covered after you run it, I think is a dangerous one. This is just something you've got to do from all angles. And yeah, it's a difficult choice. And I think that's what a lot of folks have been putting out there. When you look at some of the GitHub and you actually dig in to what some of these commands are doing and what some of the scripts are doing, it looks like something you wouldn't want to hit go all at once at scale.
The resource consumption is big, but having a career where you write a lot of scripts, then you have to write helper scripts to help those scripts. You don't know when you're done. So it's not just once. Sometimes you don't know the progress. You're on a server that has a large amount of disk space and you're crawling the entire disk. That's why a platform like Tanium that has all the governance and the guardrails in place, to manage CPU and memory and those kind of things, those scripts. Why I will say, when you're on the battlefield, sometimes you have edge cases where you need to do some stuff like that for verification or confirmation. But as a full service go forward plan, it's very difficult to manage those.
Yeah, I think the key word there is that I heard from you, Ashton, was that it's a one-time thing. I can run the script and it tells me what was the state right then. And then 5 minutes later, that state's no longer valid. And that's why Tanium can help us get this, over time. So Ashton, I know in our community post, a lot of people have been following. There's a flow chart that kind of ties together all the different components within Tanium that address the solution. But I know you mentioned to me there's another flow chart that really helps tactically with people that are trying to identify machines that are remediated or not remediated, so forth. Could you walk us through that flow that people in the field are using?
Yeah. This is again a continuous effort. So a flow chart with all the right arrows is necessary to get a good process on making sure that we actually are good and we are comprehensive. So you'll see it starts with a reveal scan, which is returning back thousands of hits in a lot of organizations. And so understanding what to do with those hits is really important. So once we detect a pattern, folks are tagging something as an example, Log4j potentially vulnerable, and then going in reveal and doing more investigation, confirming or rejecting hits, right? We're finding things like pom.xml files and manifest.mf files, some of these other ones that give us a good indication that we have a vulnerable instance of Log4j, that we can confirm those hits, or we can also ensure that they're patched, right? And then tag them appropriately. Either remove the potentially vulnerable and add a positive, they are vulnerable, which moves them into remediation. And then we can remediate with things like Tanium deploy, Tanium core, Tanium patch, depending on the application that is introducing the vulnerability. And then we remove the tagging. And overall, if we continue with this process, the system, the not having the tag of Log4j potentially vulnerable or Log4j vulnerable means that we are clean from a system standpoint. But again, it's a continuous process. If it gets reinstalled again, this reveal scan is one that is continuously running, which is really, really important. And one thing I'd like to show the admins, if you don't mind, Ashley, when you confirm those hits, this is a question within the community article that folks are asking. When you confirm a hit that, yes, this is a match for what I am looking for, you can return that back with the reveal confirmed file sensor. And so this is really important because now I can get my OS, I could get my host name, and I get the full path, which gives me an indicator of what is the application that is vulnerable as well. So these confirmed hits are the ones that you do confirm, and there is that built-in workflow to the console as well.
Thanks for that insight to what's happening in the field, because I think about tagging in Tanium as one of those everyday skills in Tanium that if you're in the trenches with Tanium, you're tagging machines. And imagine, thousands of machines with a yellow sticky note that says, we've done this one, we haven't done that one, right? So we got to have a way to keep up with these machines and go peel those sticky notes off and put the next one on. Okay, this one's done, this one's not done right. And then, and so we get all that done, and I think we'll talk about this in a second, but then somebody restores a backup and it just undoes all that work. So it's really is a continual scanning and visibility remediation cycle.
That flow chart is also, it's a good process for anything, whether or not you're looking for social security numbers, credit card numbers, chemical formulas. Remember, Reveal is a data sensitivity tool, a data privacy tool. And with the way it works with the opaque tokens and then all that data being stored securely on the local disk, this tagging method and this flow chart is very good to process. Again, it's a data problem, and to be able to process data, this is gold. It's a good stuff.
Which is a nice segue Tim, I'd like to ask you. So some people are out there. I know you've run a security team for years. Some people might be thinking, well, the POC is over. We don't need these additional modules any longer. But I'm guessing that you've been around to watch these things happen and come back around again. Tell us about before and after Log4j.
So in any vulnerability management program or vulnerability assessment program, you do this triage. This is the very first thing you do to assess, does it matter to me? Then afterwards, you're doing the remediation, but it never stops. You don't know when admin's going to install a backup that there was a vulnerable copy in, or reinstall from some gold image that is no longer gold because it has a vulnerable image. So there's an entire process you have to go through to make sure your backups are cleansed, your gold images are cleansed. And then on top of that, the regulators are going to come along, because now that they know about it, yes, you have to worry about all the attackers, the nation states, and even the red teamers and the pen testers. They all know about it, but the regulators will do. In the event of struts, 4 years after struts, I was still answering regulators, not just showing them where it is, but refining and showing them that I had a process that our people, process, and technology could detect, respond, and remediate any struts anytime it happened. That's not going to change for Log4j or any other vulnerability. This one's different because it's a component, but we have to be very careful. You're going to get asked that question. Just the other day, I don't know if it was yesterday, FTC, Federal Trade Communication, they said if you do not protect your customers' data, from the enterprise or in the enterprise, that there will be large fines. For Equifax, that fine was $700 million. That didn't count the cost of their brand reputation and lost business and all those kind of things. That was just one regulatory fine. So yes, it's going to be around quite some time.
And I would add here, if you don't mind, Ashley, one of the things we're seeing in the field whenever people are running this is a very large prevalence of version 1 of Log4j. And so it just shows how long these things stay around on disk and how often they are potentially reinstalled or backed up. There is almost as many version 1, which has been end of life, as there is version 2 of Log4j. And it's just such a huge point because this will be a continuous effort. People are not going to know, and it will reappear.
So we've got a pattern here that repeats itself. And particularly, Tim, I'd like to hear you talk about, open source risk, vendor risk. How do we manage this going forward? The beyond Log4j story.
Right. So these vulnerabilities, they do tax your systems. They tax your people, your processes, your technology. But at the same time, they're a gift, an unwanted gift, but they're a gift because they give you the time to go tune what those processes are, to understand, because open source software is a threat. When it gets downloaded and gets put into, we know about struts, but we also, this time last year, were dealing with SolarWinds. They're all supply chain attacks because somewhere along the line, some vulnerable code, and at the time it was put in, it was not just known as vulnerable. Typically it was a feature that somebody wanted, as in the case for Log4j. It's a feature that folks wanted. So having a process where you can wash, rinse, and repeat to understand where everything is at. So with Tanium as a platform, number one, where's all my endpoints? Where's all the applications on the endpoints? Then with Index, where are all the files of those applications? And then these open source software, or any component for that matter, it could be a closed source, a DLL that might have a vulnerability. To be able to find things at that level does require you look at the file system table, but in this case, look inside contents of files. That's why this novel use of Reveal has come about, because now we can look inside of jars, inside of ears and wars, and say, oh, this has been repackaged or renamed. Also, if you go to GitHub, if you just go grab a basic component and see where else it's for, it could be in the tens of thousands that this base code has been reused elsewhere. And so now we're at the state where the next level of cybersecurity maturity is to not just understand our machines, our applications, and what's on our network and what's running on those devices. It is what files are used. And we don't have a good, SBOM, a software bill of materials. Yes, there are tools that can help you track all OSS and what's in there, but they're really only good for the applications you as the enterprise develop, because you're making the sausage so you can say what's in it. But when you're a blue team defender, you don't know what's in the sausage. So it takes something like Reveal to be able to dissect, if you will, and see what's there. So that's why it's very, very important going forward. Open source software threat, if you will, and I use that term loosely, but anytime something's vulnerable is going to come around, it's going to take a while. I mean, you're going to have a process to be able to find it, because the attackers will. And in this case, you're finding, I've heard people say, yeah, that's on disk, it doesn't matter. Well, it matters to an attacker. They will use that, even old versions or versions that are dormant, they can use those. And in some server instances, you may have 3 or 4 versions running at the same time. So having this level of visibility is key. Like I heard said the other day, the best security tool is the one that gives you the best data. And Reveal just gives you a whole nother level of data that you can go make good security decisions based upon.
So with your years of experience, Tim, running a security team, these are a lot of great tips. How would you summarize, as we're running out of time here, what would you say, if you could boil it down to 1, 2, 3 things that you want to make sure that people are focusing on during this as they look towards the future? How would you kind of summarize that up?
I would look at it as understanding people typically put tools in buckets. Oh, I have a compliance scanner. I have a DLP tool. I have this. When you look at this, you get to see your entire organization holistically. And what does it look like from beginning to end? And when you get down to it, the problem you're mostly faced with is a data problem. As Ashton said earlier, people, I think, I'll use the word intimidated because they see this data and like, well, that doesn't change the problem. We have a data problem. So we have to put in processes. Yes, when an attack happens, you ask, does it matter to me? You get all your signature-based stuff, whether that's web application firewalls, EDR, next-gen AVs, you get them detecting the exploits itself, but it becomes a hunting exercise. You have to go hunt because the attackers are hunting, and you have to stay ahead of them. So that's the process that you have to make sure that all your people, processes, and technologies can come to the table and answer this one, or answer vulnerabilities like this, because they can't find it, because they don't have the data. Reveal, for example, even though some people want to say it's a DLP tool, DLPs typically do data in motion. So it's going to a USB drive on the endpoint or going out the email server or out the web proxy. This problem is, yes, you could try to go look for JNDI. That won't work very well. Number one, it's a lookup. Number two, there's so many ways to obfuscate it with variables and coding. So even though you could use your rules, it's very difficult to find or to be for sure. But if you're looking at the disk, you can know for sure where it's at and then make a decision on what it is you need to do with it. So I would tell folks, first of all, it's going to test every one of your processes. Check with your people, make sure they're not getting burned out, make sure you have rotations in. Personalities get heated, they get hot. But the problem is typically we got a data problem and we don't know how to answer it. Let's build better processes, make sure our tools are tuned to go get that data for us so we can make the best security decisions.
Well, thank you, both of you, for this really valuable conversation today around what's going on in the field right now, how Tanium is helping us in the fight against Log4j vulnerabilities, Log4Shell. And thank you, Ashton, for that. Tim, thank you for your seasoned advice here. As you've become very quickly inside the company for a few months, you're already becoming everybody's mentor when it comes to security practices. So thank you for offering that to our viewers today. It's been very helpful. So to you that are watching, I know we have Tanium admins that watch this show. Hopefully now you've got an idea of what's going on in other customer environments and how some other clever ways, some things that you can look for to help scope and identify this. You've heard about references to Tanium Reveal. Well, also, Ashton mentioned Tanium Map, which is another one of our modules that maps connections between machines. Talked about Index, which comes with a couple of our different modules, including Reveal or Threat Response. There's Comply. There's a lot of different pieces to this. And this show, we're only able to cover so much. But what I want to do is I want to point you to a treasure trove of resources that we've created for you. You can go to bit.ly/Tanium Log4j or tanium.com/Log4j. And there you're going to find a number of resources, including links to all of the shows that we've done on this topic. a long format webinar with some of our own experts who are doing the research here, a link to our community post, which gives you the tactical step-by-step guidance on how to find and remediate this using Tanium. So all those resources and more are available to you at our website, tanium.com. That's all in the show notes. And while you're down there in the show notes, hit like and subscribe. Sorry, the obligatory YouTuber, got to say that, like and subscribe while you're there. And the takeaway here from the show, we've titled the show Beyond Log4j. So we see that's very real, very in our face right now, but we know that what we're learning and what we're practicing as both as Tanium admins and as security teams responding to this, these are patterns that we're going to repeat for years to come. Like Tim was saying, the auditors are going to be asking you about this for a long time. So hopefully you've got some more tips. You've got another shot in the arm to get back in the fight here. And also, if you have any questions about how to implement this, you've read through the docs, you've watched the videos, reach out to your account team, reach out to support. This is top of mind for everybody at Tanium right now. We'd love to help any way we can. If there's something that you're not finding, please let us know because we're here to help. So like I mentioned on our last episode, got a new paint job for the show, some new graphics, some new music. So I'm going to just let some slides roll here with some takeaways today, some links, and all that's down in the show notes as well. Special thanks again to our father-son team here, Tim and Ashton, today. And until next time, go Tanium.